You were living and working in the Philippines when you get this call. Come be in our band. Did you think you were dreaming?
One of the weirdest moments of my life, you know. See, guitar god calling me and asking me to audition for the, you know.
The air inside the Smart Araneta Coliseum in Manila crackled with anticipation. 20,000 fans packed the legendary venue, their collective energy building into a palpable force as they waited for Journey to take the stage. For many, this wasn't just another concert. It was a homecoming celebration for Arnel Pineda, the local boy whose fairy tale rise from poverty to international rock stardom had become a source of national pride. Backstage, Arnel paced in the green room, his pre-show ritual unchanged despite 17 years fronting one of rock's most iconic bands. At 57, his compact frame remained energetic, his voice defying the toll that decades of powerful performances should have exacted. He rolled his shoulders, did his vocal exercises, and said a silent prayer, the same one he'd been saying since his first performance with Journey. "Thank you for this life I never thought possible. Help me make them feel something tonight." 5 minutes, Arnel, the stage manager called, poking his head through the door. Arnel nodded, taking a deep breath. No matter how many times he'd done this, in venues from Tokyo to London, Sydney to New York, performing in Manila always sent additional butterflies swirling through his stomach. These were his people, the ones who had watched him rise from singing in small clubs for food money to fronting a rock and roll Hall of Fame band. The other band members filed past, giving him fist bumps and shoulder squeezes, their communication honed by years on the road together. They understood the significance of Manila for their vocalist, always giving him a moment alone before these hometown shows. When the lights finally dimmed in the arena, the roar was deafening. As Journey launched into their opening number, Arnel felt the familiar transformation, the nervous energy channeling into performance adrenaline, his voice finding its power, his body moving with practiced precision across the stage. 3 songs in, thoroughly warmed up, he paused to address the crowd in Tagalog, then English. "Manila!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the massive space. "It's always special coming home. No matter where I go, who I sing for, you are my heart." The audience erupted, Filipino flags waving throughout the arena. Arnel scanned the sea of faces as he always did, making eye contact with fans in different sections, trying to make the massive venue feel intimate. That's when he saw her. 7 rows back, center section, under the direct glow of a stage light. A face that propelled him instantly backward through time. Older now, her hair streaked with silver instead of the midnight black he remembered, but unmistakably her. Maria, his first music teacher. The woman who had changed the trajectory of his life when he was just a frightened, hungry 12-year-old boy. He faltered mid-sentence, the words dying in his throat as their eyes locked across the distance. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Arnel stood frozen on the stage of his triumphant homecoming concert, staring at the ghost of his past. The band noticed immediately, the guitarist stepping forward with a concerned glance. The crowd's cheers took on a questioning tone. In his earpiece, the tour manager's voice crackled. "Arnel? You okay?" With the professional discipline of a veteran performer, Arnel recovered, forcing a smile. "Sorry about that," he said into the microphone, his voice slightly rougher than before. "I just saw someone I haven't seen in many, many years. Someone very important to me." The crowd murmured curiously. The woman, Maria, looked startled at being noticed, her hand rising to cover her mouth. Arnel turned to the band, whispering something. After a brief conference, he faced the audience again. "We're going to change the set list a bit if you don't mind." His eyes returned to Maria. "This next song is for someone who believed in me when no one else did. Not even myself." As the opening notes of Faithfully filled the arena, a song not originally planned until much later in the show, Arnel's mind raced back through 4 decades, to a time before fame, before Journey, before anyone knew his name. Manila, 1984. Arnel Pineda was 12 years old, his father struggling to support the family after his mother's death 2 years earlier. School had become a luxury they could no longer afford. Instead, Arnel collected bottles and newspapers, selling them to recyclers for a few pesos that meant the difference between eating and going hungry. Most days, he managed to scrape together just enough for a cup of rice, sometimes with a small piece of fish if he was fortunate. He slept wherever he could find shelter, under market stalls, in abandoned buildings, occasionally on a relative's floor when desperation overcame pride. But even in those darkest days, Arnel had his voice, a gift his mother had recognized and nurtured before tuberculosis claimed her. When he sang, he could briefly escape the gnawing hunger, the bone-deep exhaustion, the constant fear. He sang while he worked, sang himself to sleep, sang to comfort the other street children who became his makeshift family. One sweltering afternoon, seeking relief from the heat, he slipped into the back of a small community center, where the windows were open and fans pushed the humid air around. Inside, a music class was underway. Young children from middle-class families sat in orderly rows, learning basic music theory from a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a patient demeanor. Arnel crouched in the shadows, listening intently as the teacher explained about notes and scales. When the children attempted to sing a simple melody, he couldn't help himself. He quietly harmonized from his hiding place, his untrained but naturally perfect pitch adding an ethereal quality to their struggling voices. The teacher stopped abruptly, turning toward the sound. "Who's there?" she called. Arnel tried to flee, but she was quicker, catching sight of him before he could escape through the window. "Wait," she said, her voice gentler now. "Was that you singing?" Terrified, certain he was about to be punished for trespassing, Arnel nodded mutely. Instead of anger, her face showed something he rarely encountered from adults: interest, respect even. "I'm Mrs. Vega, Maria Vega. What's your name?" "Arnel," he whispered, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. "You have a gift, Arnel, a very special one." She hesitated, taking in his ragged clothes, his too thin frame. "Would you like to join our class today?" He shook his head, eyes darting toward the exit. "I don't have money for school, ma'am." "This isn't about money," she said. "This is about music. Please, just for today." Something in her voice, the sincerity perhaps, or the first genuine kindness he'd encountered in weeks, made him stay. For the next hour, he sat awkwardly at the back of the class, absorbing everything, occasionally demonstrating his natural ability when Mrs. Vega encouraged him. When the class ended, she approached him with a sandwich and a bottle of water. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked casually, as if his presence was the most natural thing in the world. He came back the next day, and the next. Mrs. Vega never mentioned payment, never asked uncomfortable questions about his circumstances. She simply taught him, fed him, and most importantly, treated him with dignity. After 2 weeks, she handed him a small wrapped package. Inside was a cassette player, headphones, and several tapes. Queen, Survivor, Journey, Boston. "Study these," she told him. "Listen to how they use their voices, how they control their breath, how they tell stories with their songs." The gifts were worth more than anything Arnel owned, probably more than he could make in months of collecting bottles. "I can't," he protested. "It's too much." "It's an investment," she replied firmly. "Someday, you'll do something important with that voice. This is just a tool to help you get there." For the next year, through Mrs. Vega's patient teaching and those precious tapes, Arnel developed his voice, learning to harness his natural talent with technique. The cassette player became his most treasured possession, hidden carefully wherever he slept. Journey's Escape album became his favorite, Steve Perry's soaring vocals a masterclass in what was possible. Arnel would sing along for hours, matching Perry note for note, dreaming impossible dreams of someday being on a real stage. Then, abruptly, Mrs. Vega was gone. The community center closed for renovations, and when Arnel returned, a new teacher had taken her place. All he learned was that Mrs. Vega had moved away. To the United States, someone thought, to care for an ailing parent. She'd left no forwarding address, no way for a street child to find her. But she'd left him with something more valuable: belief in his own talent, and the technical foundation that would eventually carry him from singing competitions to local bands to, incredibly, Journey itself. Through all the intervening years, the continued struggles, the battles with poverty and alcoholism, The small successes and crushing setbacks on his path to discovery. Arnel had never forgotten her. He'd searched for her when success finally came, wanting to thank her, to show her that her investment had paid off beyond anyone's wildest dreams. But Manila's poor record-keeping and the chaos of his early life made finding one teacher who'd moved away decades earlier an impossible task. Until tonight, when she appeared like an apparition, 7 rows back in his hometown arena. On stage at the Araneta Coliseum, Arnel sang faithfully with a depth of emotion that silenced the massive crowd. His eyes never left Maria's face, decades of unspoken gratitude pouring through every note. By the final chorus, tears streamed openly down his cheeks, his voice somehow stronger and more powerful through the emotion. As the song ended, the audience erupted, but Arnel barely heard them. He stepped to the edge of the stage, pointing directly to Maria. "Mrs. Vega," he said into the microphone, his voice breaking slightly. "Maria, I've been looking for you for 17 years. A spotlight found her, illuminating her shocked expression as 20,000 heads turned in her direction. The crowd, sensing something profound was happening, fell respectfully silent. "This woman," Arnel continued, "gave a homeless boy his first cassette player and journey tapes nearly 40 years ago. She taught me to sing when I had nothing else. And then she disappeared before I could thank her." Maria's hands covered her face, her shoulders shaking with emotion. Beside her, a man, presumably her husband, had his arm around her, looking up at Arnel with a stunned expression. "Security is going to bring you backstage after the show," Arnel said. "If that's okay with you?" She nodded, too overcome to speak. "In the meantime," Arnel addressed the audience, "I need to properly dedicate this concert to my first teacher, the person who saw something in me when I was invisible to everyone else." For the remainder of the 2-hour performance, Arnel sang with transcendent energy, the band feeding off his emotional state to deliver one of their most powerful shows in years. Between songs, he shared brief snippets of his story with Maria, filling in the Manila audience on a piece of their hometown hero's journey they hadn't heard before. When the final encore ended and the band took their bows, Arnel leaned into the microphone one last time. "Mrs. Vega, I'll see you in a few minutes. Everyone else, salamat sa inyong lahat. Thank you all, from the bottom of my heart. Manila, you will always be home." Backstage, Arnel paced the green room, as nervous as he'd been before the show. When the door finally opened and security ushered in Maria, now in her 70s, elegant in a simple blue dress, and her husband, Arnel, froze. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the years falling away. Then, with a sob, Arnel crossed the room and embraced her. "I never thought I'd find you," he whispered. "I've looked everywhere." "I never thought you'd want to," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You were just one of many students." Arnel pulled back, looking at her incredulously. "One of many? Mrs. Vega, you saved my life. Without you, without those tapes, without someone believing in me." He shook his head, unable to complete the thought. Her husband stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm David Vega. I've heard about the little boy with the amazing voice for 40 years, but she never used your name. She didn't know what happened to you until you joined Journey. Even then, she couldn't believe it was the same child." "Why didn't you contact me?" Arnel asked Maria. She smiled sadly. "What would I say? Hello, famous rock star. Remember when I gave you a sandwich? It seemed presumptuous." Arnel laughed through his tears. "Presumptuous? You're the reason I'm standing here." Over the next hour, as the arena emptied and the crew dismantled the stage, they filled in the gaps of 4 decades. Maria and David had indeed moved to California in 1985 to care for her mother. They'd stayed, raising 2 daughters there. Now retired, they'd returned to the Philippines 3 years ago, settling in a small town outside Manila. "We never expected to attend your concert," David explained. "But our grandson, he's a huge fan. He saved up to buy us tickets for our anniversary. He has no idea about your connection." "Where is he?" Arnel asked. "Bring him back here." Soon, a wide-eyed 16-year-old boy was shaking Arnel's hand, speechless with awe as he learned his grandmother had taught his rock idol. As the night grew late, Arnel made a decision. Turning to his tour manager, he said, "Cancel my flight tomorrow, and find me a car and driver for the day." The manager raised an eyebrow but knew better than to argue. "What should I tell the label execs you're meeting in Tokyo?" "Tell them something more important came up." Arnel turned back to Maria. "If it's all right with you, I'd like to come see where you live. Meet your family properly. We have 40 years to talk about." The following day, Arnel Pineda, international rock star, voice of Journey, man whose life story had been optioned by Hollywood, sat in the modest living room of a retirement village outside Manila, looking through Maria's old photo albums. "I don't have many from the community center days," she apologized. "Film was expensive then." But there, in one faded photograph, was a group of children arranged in rows for a recital. At the end of the back row stood a painfully thin boy with a serious expression, wearing clothes too big for his frame. "That's the only picture I have of you," Maria said softly. "I almost didn't include you because I was afraid someone would ask questions about the obviously homeless child in my class. But you were so proud of being in that recital. I couldn't leave you out." Arnel stared at his 12-year-old self, emotions overwhelming him. "May I have a copy of this?" Of course. As the day progressed, more family members arrived. Maria's daughters and their husbands, grandchildren ranging from toddlers to teenagers, all initially starstruck but gradually relaxing as Arnel shared stories and answered questions. In the late afternoon, when the house had quieted somewhat, Arnel and Maria sat on her small porch watching the sunset. "I have to ask," Arnel said. "Why did you help me? Really? I was just some street kid who snuck into your class." Maria considered the question. "I'd like to say it was purely your talent, which was extraordinary. But honestly, you reminded me of my brother." She hadn't mentioned a brother before.